The wind outside St. Bridget's Hospital blew gently that night, as if it already knew something was about to change forever. Inside, Mr. Duncan waited alone in the corridor, his hands trembling, his heart pacing faster than his feet ever could. He had been dreaming about this day for months, dreaming about holding his son. He and his wife, Christiana, had agreed to name him Daniel, but instead of joy, a nurse stepped out with sadness, weighing her steps like bricks tied to her ankles. She didn't have to say a word. Duncan already knew. The doctor followed behind and finally spoke. "Your wife. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. But your daughters, your twin daughters, are alive." Daughters, plural. He didn't even get a chance to respond before two nurses walked out with pink bundles in their arms. They laid them in his shaking hands, tiny, warm, innocent. They had no idea that they had just lost their mother, and he had lost the love of his life. He stared at them through watery eyes and whispered, "Lillian, Millie, I will take care of you girls, I promise." That night Mr. Duncan didn't sleep. He sat in silence, surrounded by unpaid bills, a funeral list, and formula tins he couldn't afford. Christiana had died just 3 months after his own mother. Now he had no one left. No one but these two little souls who breathed softly beside him. The following days were chaos. Bottles ran out. Diapers were made from old bedsheets. He didn't know what he was doing, but he knew he had to do it. Then came a kind stranger, Madame Ayel, a midwife from the local clinic. She handed him bottles of donor milk and said, "These girls don't just belong to you, they belong to us all." And just like that, Duncan began to hope again. He worked. During the day fixing chairs, tables and doors. At night he changed nappies and sang lullabies, most of them out of tune. The townspeople peeked through windows and fences, gossiping, "A carpenter raising twin girls alone, he'll break." But he didn't. He stayed. He stitched baby clothes from his old church shirts. He tied the twins to his back with long wrappers while carving bed frames. Every time exhaustion whispered, "You can't do this," his promise echoed louder. "I will take care of you." Time moved slowly but surely. Lillian discovered her thumb at 3 months. Millie learned to scream, louder than a goat by 5. Duncan juggled bottles and business, sometimes literally. He'd be rocking one cradle with his foot while shaping headboards with his hands. One afternoon, he collapsed right in his shed, passed out cold. When he came to, the village chief's wife stood over him, hands on hips. "You want to join?" "Your wife in the grave, let us help." He didn't want help, but help came anyway. 4 women volunteered to rotate visits. One washed, one cooked, one babysat. And every evening, Madame Ayel arrived like clockwork, holding more donor milk. She reminded him often. Christiana helped many women learn to read. This is their way of thanking her. Slowly, things began to feel less impossible. The twins grew chubbier. Their laughs filled the once silent house. And just as he thought life might be settling, the pressure of society crept in. Elders began asking, "When will you marry again? A man alone is not a man." He ignored them. His daughters came first, always, but life had its own plans. At the twins' 5th birthday, he met Clara. She was a widow, soft-spoken, gentle, and always brought mango slices when she visited. She smiled at the girls, praised Duncan's furniture, and whispered, "I will love them like my own." After months of praying, overthinking, and battling guilt, Duncan gave in. He married her under a mango tree with a small choir and even smaller cake. For 6 months it was paradise. Clara baked bread. She told bedtime stories. The girls called her Mama Clara, and then it broke. One late evening, Duncan came home to screams. Clara stood with a wooden spoon raised above the girls, red welts already rising on their arms. "You bastard twins!" she shouted. "You spilled palm oil on my wrapper," Millie cried. Lillian stepped in front of her like a shield. Duncan froze. Then something in him snapped. "If you ever raise your hand at them again, you will answer to me, and to God." Clara's eyes blazed with hatred. "You think anyone else wants a man cursed with motherless girls?" She hissed before storming out before dawn, leaving nothing but a cracked spoon on the floor. The community buzzed again. Another failed marriage, another reason to mock him. But Duncan didn't care anymore. That night, he held his daughters tight and whispered the promise again. "I'll never risk you like that again, you're all I've got." Rain tapped gently against the rusted roof of Duncan's carpentry shop as he sat alone, staring at his calloused hands. It had been 2 weeks since Clara left, but the house felt lighter without her. The girls had returned to laughter, scribbling doodles on scraps of plywood while he sanded cabinet legs. But Duncan knew peace wouldn't last. School fees were coming. Real school now, not just scribbles and rhymes. And he didn't have the money. The shop had kept them alive for years, but work was thinning. People were choosing cheaper furniture from the city. His handcrafted desks sat unsold. The twins were 5 now, full of questions he didn't always have answers for. Lillian wanted to learn how to spell aeroplane. Millie wanted to fix broken radios like Papa fixes chairs. Duncan smiled, but inside he was terrified. His girls were bright, shining like lanterns. But he was just a man with a chisel and dreams bigger than his pocket. One day, while sweeping sawdust, he caught sight of a government notice pasted on fee. The community board outside the local council hall, "Primary education now compulsory. All children must be enrolled." The announcement hit him like a hammer. It wasn't just about wanting to send them now. It was the law. He walked back home slowly, hands behind his back, deep in thought. At the dinner table they had boiled yam and palm oil. The twins clapped when they saw it, grateful as always. Duncan, though, barely touched his plate. That night, he lay awake, staring at the wooden beams above his bed. His wife Christiana used to say, "When the time comes to choose between comfort and purpose, choose purpose. Comfort fades, purpose doesn't." By morning, he had made his decision. He, dressed in his only good shirt, folded the deed to the carpentry shop in his pocket, and walked across town to the land registry office. The woman at the counter blinked in shock. "You want to sell your entire workshop?" He nodded. "If I don't, my girls won't go to school." Word spread like harmattan fire. By evening, the whole village was buzzing. He's mad. Sold the only thing feeding him for girls. They'll marry and leave him. Even some elders pulled him aside, shaking their heads. Why not keep the shop and let the girls help later? Sons would stay. Daughters, they'll forget. But Duncan didn't flinch. He had looked into his daughter's eyes. He had seen hunger, not for food, but for knowledge. 3 weeks later, he finalized the sale. The buyer, a businessman from out of town, offered just enough to cover 3 years of fees, uniforms, and some rent. The shop, his pride, was now someone else's. On his last day there, he swept the floor one final time, then took a deep breath and nailed the door shut. The sign that once read, "Duncan's Carpentry, handmade with heart," swayed in the breeze as he locked it. Lillian and Millie stood behind him, holding his hands. "Papa," Millie whispered, "where will we make our birdhouses now?" He smiled sadly. "We'll find new wood somewhere." They moved into a cramped 2-room space behind the city. Library, cracked windows, squeaky doors, one bulb flickering in the hallway. But the school was just a 15-minute walk away, and the library had more books than they had ever seen. Duncan took the only job he could find, cleaning the library before sunrise. The pay was poor, but he never complained. Each morning he'd mop the marble floors, dust the shelves, and fix loose chairs for free. By the time the twins arrived after school to do homework, the place gleamed. The librarian, Mrs. Mensa, noticed. "Your daughters are sharp," she once said, sliding extra textbooks into their bags. "And you, Mr. Duncan, you have the heart of 10 men." At home they ate plain rice, sometimes with nothing but salt. On rare days, when leftover soup from the library cafeteria came home with him, it was a feast. The twins never grumbled. Instead, they studied harder. Lillian drew planes with colored pencils donated by a volunteer. Millie fixed a broken fan they found in the trash. As they grew, so did Duncan's pride and his worry. School expenses piled up. Exam fees, project materials, books. The rent crept up too, and his back began to ache from endless hours of cleaning. Still, he said nothing. One evening, he caught the girls whispering as they emptied a biscuit tin. Inside were coins, saved from chores, odd jobs, and library bake sales. They pushed it toward him. "It's for school, Papa, so you can rest one day." Duncan blinked hard, swallowing tears. "I didn't raise daughters," he said. "I raised warriors, but even warriors need armor." He stared at his toolbox, the last gift from his own father, passed down through generations. Selling it felt like cutting off his own hands. But school was starting again, and they needed books. The Yaos. Next day he pawned it. When the clerk placed the money in his hand, Duncan looked down at his palms, scarred, calloused, and now empty. The city buzzed louder than the village ever had. Buses roared, street hawkers shouted, and car horns sang like angry birds. But inside that little two-room rental behind the library, something quieter was blooming, something strong. Each morning, Duncan woke before dawn. He ironed the twins' school uniforms one after the other, sometimes burning a collar, sometimes forgetting to button the cuffs. But he tried. Breakfast was often bread crusts and tea watered down to stretch. Lillian and Millie never complained. They'd kiss his cheek and march off with backpacks almost heavier than their shoulders could carry. At school, they stood out, not for the shoes they wore, which had been patched 3 times, or the old books they clutched, but for their minds. Lillian aced science, Millie dismantled old radios for fun, and tried to rebuild them after lunch. Back at the library, Duncan cleaned floors and toilets without shame. Every now and then, he'd sit by a quiet shelf and read from second-hand encyclopedias, tracing the maps his daughters talked about. The librarian, Mrs. Mensa, had grown fond of them all. Sometimes she'd cook extra rice and slip him a wrapped portion, pretending she accidentally made too much. But it wasn't just kindness they needed. It was money. High school came. Fast, and with it came sharp expenses. Lab coats, calculator, transport cards, uniform upgrades. Duncan tightened his belt, literally. Some days he skipped lunch. At night, he stitched torn socks with needle and thread, muttering, "They're going to change the world and they won't do it barefoot." The community, though distant, hadn't gone silent. Word had spread. That Duncan's still cleaning floors, all for girls? He's lost his head. Some of the old neighbors mocked. Others, silently impressed, kept their opinions to themselves. One evening, while folding clothes, Millie asked, "Papa, why didn't you just send us to the free local school?" Duncan looked at her and answered simply, "Because you don't feed eagles breadcrumbs." Then came the government audit. Inspectors visited the library, checking safety standards. Duncan was told his cleaning tools weren't up to code. He needed to buy new gloves, a specific brand of mop, and a special solution for the marble. The cost? More than a month's salary. When he hesitated, they handed him a warning. Failure to comply may lead to contract termination. That night, he sat in the dark while the twins did homework by torchlight. He didn't tell them. He just made a quiet decision. He would clean more buildings. By week's end, he had taken a second job mopping a local office after hours. So it paid a little. It cost a lot. Sleep, time, pain. His knees began to ache, his hands trembled after long nights. But still, he showed up. Every single morning. Then one weekend, the girls' school announced a field trip to the regional airport. Lillian's eyes lit up. "We'll see planes up close," Millie squealed. "Maybe they'll let us in the cockpit." Duncan smiled, but the fee, just 50 cedis per child, felt like a mountain. He told them gently, "We'll do our own trip, one day." That night he sat in bed with the field trip flyer in his lap. Just as he was about to tear it up, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Mensa stood there, holding a brown envelope. "I heard about the airport visit," she said softly. "I'd like to cover their fees." Duncan tried to refuse. She waved him off. "Christiana taught my daughter to read before she passed. Let me give back." The next Saturday, Lillian and Millie boarded the yellow school bus in clean uniforms, faces beaming. They stood on that airport runway like queens. They watched jets lift into the clouds, their dreams now no longer fantasy, but something that had weight, possibility. When they came home that evening, Lillian hugged Duncan tight. "Papa, I want to be a pilot," Millie added. And I want to build planes that never crash." He laughed, a deep, tired, joyful laugh. "Then we better get started." From that moment, everything shifted. Duncan stopped thinking about survival and started planning for victory. They created a biscuit tin savings box labeled Sky Fund. Every extra coin from Duncan's late shift, every little gift, every coin the girls earned helping at church bake sales, they dropped it all in the tin. Some nights, Duncan massaged his aching knees and Millie wrapped them in warm towels. Other times, Lillian revised her science work aloud while Duncan mended old backpacks. They moved as one unit, quiet, steady, determined. The insults kept coming. At church, in the market. When girls grow, they leave. Boys carry your name. Why waste everything for a dream that may not land? But Duncan had stopped listening, because every time he opened the school reports, saw the grades, heard the laughter, or looked into his daughter's eyes, he knew he had bet everything, and he was winning. The first acceptance letter came on a rainy Wednesday. Duncan had just returned from his night shift cleaning office toilets. His hands smelled of bleach, his back felt like cracked timber. He stepped into their tiny home and saw the envelope resting on the table like it held gold. Lillian was pacing. Millie was holding her breath. He opened it with shaking fingers. Aviation school. Accepted. Then the second envelope. Millie's engineering faculty. Accepted. They all stood there, the three of them, staring at the papers like they had just been handed passports to another world. The room, usually smelling of palm oil and liniment, now smelled like hope. Then came the tuition numbers. Duncan didn't sleep that night. He sat at the edge of the mattress, papers spread before him, calculator, blinking hopelessly. Partial scholarships, yes, but still thousands short. Fees, hostel costs, books, tools, transport. It might as well have been the price of a small island. Lillian came and sat beside him quietly. "Papa, we don't have to go now. We can wait." Millie joined her. "Or work first. Save up. Go later." Duncan looked at them and forced a smile. What kind of man raises warriors and tells them to retreat? The next day he walked to the pawn shop with the only thing he hadn't sold yet, his toolbox, the same wooden box his grandfather had carved, passed down from father to son. His heart broke a little when the shopkeeper opened it. "These are good tools," the man said, "old but still strong." "Like me," Duncan replied, trying to laugh. He walked out with barely enough to cover hostel deposits and first semester books. But it was a start. The community snickered again. The carpenter with no shop, the cleaner with no tools, the fool who sold his past for a dream about the future. But the girls packed their suitcases, filled with second-hand clothes, cracked calculators, and dreams stronger than steel. Duncan borrowed a wheelbarrow to push their luggage across the campus lawn. Students drove in with tinted cars and noisy generators. Lillian and Millie arrived with one shared bedsheet and a father too proud to rest. Outside the girls' dorm, Duncan knelt in the open, ignoring the stairs, and placed his rough hands on their heads. God give them wings. I've done all. I can. The elevator closed, taking his daughters up to floors of learning. He remained below, smiling through tears. Back home, silence filled the rooms. He returned to the library, sweeping, wiping, dusting. But now it felt different, emptier. At night he sat at their old study table, flipping through leftover notes. He missed their giggles, missed the arguments over who got the last piece of fried plantain, missed the way Millie sang off-key when focused and how Lillian twirled her pen like a pilot steering air. But sacrifice isn't just a moment. It's a long, slow burn. In the coming weeks, Duncan's body began to betray him. He slipped on a wet library floor, sprained his back, and couldn't stand straight for days. He worked through the pain, hiding his winces, but his strength wasn't what it used to be. Meanwhile, the girls battled too. University was a different beast. Classmates had tutors, personal laptops, access. Lillian used her phone flashlight to study at night. Millie borrowed lab time at midnight, dodging sleepy security guards. They still called Duncan every day. He sent motivational quotes scribbled on paper. Diamonds form under pressure. Rough stones turn smooth from time. Each call ended with 3 claps and a nose tap, their secret handshake even across distance. One day Lillian impressed a visiting flight instructor during a symposium. Her questions on cockpit design made him pause. He offered mentorship and access to simulators, something few students got. She ran to the payphone and screamed the news into Duncan's ear. That same week, Millie won a design competition, an IHB adjustable airplane winglet for small aircraft. Prize money? Enough to cover food and rent for the next month. They called Duncan again, voices trembling with pride. He danced alone in the corridor that night, mop in hand like a microphone, tears sliding down his cheeks. But joy was always followed by new battles, eviction notices, missed meals, lab equipment fees, illness. Duncan lost a second job due to his back. He began sleeping in the library storeroom on a mat donated by the security guard. When the girls visited during break, he told them he had moved closer to work. They didn't question him. They just cleaned the place, left hot food, and hugged him longer than usual. Then one day he fainted in the hallway, right in front of Mrs. Mensah. She helped him up, scolding gently. "You're running on fumes, Duncan. You've given enough." He finally told her the truth about the eviction, the back pain, the toolbox, everything. She didn't scold again. Instead, she made calls. Fundraisers were launched. Past donors returned. Alumni sent checks. Former skeptics dropped anonymous envelopes. By the time Lillian entered her final year at Emerald Air Academy, her eyes were sharper than ever, her instincts like a born pilot. She could walk into a hangar, smell burnt rubber, and tell you which tire needed replacement. Millie, on the other hand, had become something of a legend at TechFront University. She didn't just fix machines, she redesigned them. Professors started bringing her scraps, curious what she'd invent next. But none of their victories came easy. Their bank accounts always danced dangerously close to empty. When Lillian's only laptop crashed a month before her capstone simulator flight, she borrowed one from a classmate, juggling usage during off hours. Millie stitched her cracked sneakers with dental floss and skipped meals to save data for her design submissions. Duncan did what he could. His library job had turned part-time now, but his body appreciated the rest. When he wasn't cleaning, he was attending free workshops on digital furniture design. Old dogs learn new tricks, he'd joked to the librarians, who were now more like family. One Friday afternoon, the library hosted an aviation-themed book event. Mrs. Mensah proudly displayed Lillian's photo beside a model jet. Duncan stood quietly in the back, nodding like a father holding a secret treasure. One guest leaned over and asked, "Is that your daughter?" He answered, "That's my captain." Meanwhile, Millie had begun patenting one of her innovations, a diagnostic module that could detect faults in cockpit systems before they failed. It was lightweight, cheap to produce, and genius. The university offered her a paid research internship. The money wasn't much, but she sent half home anyway. "Papa, please buy new shoes," her message read. He didn't. He used it to fix the broken ceiling fan above his bed. They were still struggling, but the world had started noticing. Lillian secured a slot in Skyway Airlines' elite internship program, the only woman out of 20 candidates. She was assigned to a senior pilot who didn't smile much but taught her the kind of lessons that don't come in textbooks. On her first co-pilot simulation, she nailed every metric. Her name was scribbled on the board with a star beside it. Someone took a photo. That photo made it online. It spread, then came the messages. "Are you the daughter of that carpenter from East Ridge? Didn't your dad used to sweep at the city library? The twins tried to keep things low. Fame wasn't their goal." But people remembered. Duncan's name started floating across campus forums, tagged under words like sacrifice, legend, and real fatherhood. Then one morning, Artisan Gallery, one of the city's most respected furniture houses, called. "We've heard about your story," the manager said. "Would you consider joining us as a design consultant?" Duncan paused. "You know I'm just a carpenter?" She laughed. "And I know what you built." The offer? Triple his cleaner salary, flexible hours, full health insurance. He hung up the phone and just stood there. Then slowly he sank into his chair, head in his hands, not crying, but laughing, shaking with the kind of joy only a man who's walked through fire understands. When he told the twins later that night, they screamed. So loud, the dormitory alarm went off. They jumped and hugged each other, knocking over a bowl of instant noodles. "Papa's back in business," Millie yelled, her eyes shining. The week of their final exams, everything felt surreal. Duncan polished his old church suit, adding a new button. He borrowed a second-hand digital camera and watched YouTube tutorials on how to use it. "I'm not missing a second," he told Mrs. Mensah, who nodded with a smile and handed him a new tie. Graduation day came. The stadium was packed, buzzing with excitement and music. Rows of caps shimmered under the sun. Duncan sat in the front, surrounded by strangers in suits and perfumes he couldn't name, but his heart beat louder than any orchestra. When Lillian's name was called, the announcer paused and added, "First officer trainee, Skyway Airlines." Duncan shot to his feet, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "That's my pilot." The crowd laughed, some clapped, others teared up. Then Millie stepped forward, her name followed by valedictorian BSc Mechanical Engineering, Avionics. She spotted her father through the flash of cameras and blew a kiss. His hands were shaking too much to take a picture. A woman next to him leaned over. "Don't worry, sir, I got it." After the ceremony, the girls dragged him, not to the dining hall, not to a restaurant, but to the tarmac. Skyway Airlines had parked one of their training jets for display. "Come on," Lillian said. "So I want to show you something." Inside the cockpit, Duncan sat with wide eyes, brushing switches with reverence. "I used to make toy planes from scrap wood," he whispered. "And now you've made a real pilot," Lillian replied, gripping his hand. Millie joined them and handed him a tiny carved plane, smooth, delicate, made from leftover mahogany. "For your new office at Artisan Gallery," she said. "First wood you ever let me touch." He held it like it was alive. A reporter caught the moment. "Sir," she asked, "what kept you going all these years?" He looked at his daughters, then at the camera. "A promise," he said simply. "A promise to their mother." The moment. Duncan's interview hit the internet. Everything shifted. The video, just under 3 minutes long, showed a man in a faded suit standing beside his daughters in their graduation gowns, holding a small carved plane. His words were simple, his voice steady. "I made a promise to their mother. I kept it. That was it, but the world heard more." Overnight, shares exploded. The story of the poor man who cleaned floors, sold his tools, and raised 2 daughters into a pilot and an engineer spread like wildfire. Journalists called it the father's flight. Duncan didn't even own a smartphone, so he didn't realize how big it was until Mrs. Mensah knocked on his door at dawn, phone in hand, screen glowing. "You're trending," she said, grinning. "Worldwide," he blinked. "I'm what?" Soon donations poured in. Messages flooded inboxes. Single mothers, struggling fathers, children estranged from parents, all writing to say, "Thank you for reminding us what love really looks like," and the twins? They moved fast. They created a scholarship fund, Christiana's Promise, in honor of the mother they never got to meet. The goal was simple: fund education for underprivileged girls in STEM. The first week, they raised enough for Rose. 6 students. The next, 20. Duncan sat in his new design office at Artisan Gallery, looking around in disbelief. Smooth walnut floors, glass panels, adjustable drafting tables. His own corner desk, carved from red oak. That miniature mahogany plane sat beside a nameplate, Mr. Duncan Owusu, design consultant. He arrived early, left late, taught apprentices, drew furniture blueprints with the same precision he once carved toy shelves. When a client asked about his design inspiration, he replied, 2 girls and a promise. Meanwhile, Lillian had begun flying short regional routes as a co-pilot. She sent Duncan postcards from every city she landed in. Each ended the same. "We made it, Papa." Millie's diagnostics module was officially patented, and Eroch hired her full-time as a systems engineer. She was the only female in her department, and the youngest. One Saturday, the girls picked Duncan up in a rented car. They said it was for a furniture job, and drove him out of the city. When they pulled up before a cream-colored house with tall hedges, Duncan leaned forward. "Whose house is this?" he asked. Millie smiled. "Yours." Lillian jumped out of the car and walked him to the front gate. A golden plaque read, "Duncan House." He froze. "I can't accept this," he whispered. "This is too much. You once slept on a storeroom." "Floor," Lillian replied, "so we could have textbooks. Accept this roof because now we can give it to you." Inside, the house was warm and full of light. Framed photos lined the walls. Christiana holding newborns, toddler twins sitting on his lap, teenage girls in school uniforms, graduation gowns, cockpit tours, and in the center of the living room, framed behind glass, his original carpentry license. They threw a housewarming feast that night. Everyone came: Mrs. Mensah, Madame Ayel, former neighbors who once whispered, apprentices from the gallery, university, professors, even strangers who had donated to the fund. Some came to apologize, others came to witness a miracle. Duncan raised a glass of malt and said, "To every person who showed me that love, even when small, is never wasted." They toasted, they laughed, and outside planes hummed overhead, tracing lines across the starlit sky. With their footing now steady, the twins turned outward. They approached the municipal council with an idea: build a combined primary school and health clinic in their rural hometown, where access to education and care was still scarce. The council hesitated until news broke about Christiana's promise and Duncan's viral story. Suddenly, permissions were granted. Land was offered. Construction began. Duncan oversaw every nail, designed custom desks with wide surfaces and rounded corners for left-handed children, built a reading bench that folded into a bunk bed, created storage spaces disguised as wooden elephants and lions to make classrooms feel magical. Lillian returned on weekends to teach aviation basics. Children giggled as they made paper planes and chased them across dirt fields. Millie installed solar panels on the clinic roof, explaining each part to curious girls who followed her with notebooks. On the school's opening day, the building shone under the sun. Bright walls, sturdy windows, a mural of Christiana reading to two girls painted across the front, the name on the sign, Christiana Memorial School and Health Center. Villagers poured in, old women wept, young mothers clapped. A choir sang a song about sacrifice and second chances, and just as the ribbon was cut, a Skyway Airlines jet flew overhead, an honorary flyover in celebration. Children squealed. Adults pointed skyward. Lillian stood beside Duncan holding his hand. Millie wiped a tear before it rolled too far. Then Duncan stepped forward and took the microphone. "Once, they told me investing in girls was a waste," he began. "That girls would grow, marry, and forget. They were right about one thing: my girls did grow, but they didn't leave me, they carried me." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, reporters asked why he didn't put his name on the school. He smiled. "Because the story isn't about me. It's about a promise that started before they were born and will continue long after I'm gone." That night, they sat on the porch of Duncan House, watching the porch light flicker gently. Duncan looked around and whispered, "Christiana, come see what your girls have become." Up in the sky, a plane blinked red as it crossed over the moon. Whether it was Lillian flying or not didn't matter, because he knew every daughter he raised carried a piece of her, a piece of him, and a piece of every promise ever kept in the dark. Years had a way of circling back. It started with a knock. Duncan had just returned from a design workshop and was polishing a walnut sculpture in his new gallery office when one of his apprentices called. "Sir, there's a visitor asking for you." He expected a client, maybe a student. Instead, he found Clara standing by the reception desk, older now, thinner. Her scarf was faded, her eyes no longer sharp but dulled with hardship. She clutched her handbag like a life jacket. It took Duncan a few seconds to recognize her. When he did, something in his chest tightened, not with love, not even with anger, but with memory. "I heard everything," she said softly. "About the girls, about the school. I came to ask for a job." Silence sat between them like a wall. The same woman who once called his daughters bastards now stood before him, humbled by time. "My second husband," she began, then stopped. "He drank, gambled, left me with nothing." Duncan said nothing. He studied her, not with cruelty, but with a craftsman's eye. seeing the cracks, the wear, the regret etched deep into the grain of her soul. Finally, he said, "You want work?" She nodded. He gestured to the HR desk. "Fill out a form. I'll give you a consulting project, admin, not client-facing. You'll report to the manager, not to me." Clara blinked. Relief and shame collided in her face. "Thank you." That night, he told the twins. They were quiet. Millie clenched her jaw. "She hit us, Papa. Called us names." Lillian sighed, older in spirit than her years. "She's not family, but she's broken, like we once were." Duncan didn't defend Clara. He didn't excuse the past, but he reminded them, mercy doesn't erase memory, but it frees the one who offers it. They nodded slowly. They wouldn't forget, but they wouldn't harden. News of Duncan's gesture spread. Some praised him, others mocked him for being too soft. He ignored both sides. He wasn't building reputation. He was building peace. Months passed. Christiana Memorial School flourished. The health clinic recorded a 40% drop in childhood illness. Enrollment doubled, especially for girls. Girls who used to fetch water all day were now learning algebra, science, coding. One small girl named Amina announced proudly during show and tell, "I will become an aerospace engineer and help Captain Lillian fly bigger planes." Lillian, now a full co-pilot on international routes, shared the clip during her Skyway safety training. The instructors smiled. Millie had been promoted to lead a team at Aeroch. Her AI diagnostics module was already being adopted in regional aircraft, reducing flight delays due to mechanical surprises. She turned down job offers from abroad to stay close to her roots, to her work, and to her father. Back at Artisan Gallery, Duncan's designs began appearing in hotel lobbies, city halls, even airports. A luxury boutique commissioned him for an Africa-inspired legacy collection. He crafted every piece with local wood and personal memory, some chairs curved like a mother's embrace, some desks shaped like twin wings. One of the pieces, a reading bench carved with twirling vines and a hidden drawer underneath, won a National Design Award. At the ceremony, the presenter said, "This piece tells a story of shelter, of growth, of holding on." Duncan stepped onto the stage, hands still stained from polish. The applause came not just for the art, but for the journey behind it. That night in the mansion's garden, Lillian and Millie set up a projector under the mango tree. They played the first trailer of their upcoming documentary, Sky Fund, The Story of a Father's Flight. It opened with grainy footage of Duncan hammering wood in his old shop, then slowly blended into scenes of him pushing a wheelbarrow across a university campus, followed by graduation moments, flight decks, interviews from teachers and old neighbors crying on camera. The final shot? Duncan kneeling on the grass, hands on the heads of his daughters as they wore their graduation caps, mouths trembling from tears and laughter. The audience, neighbors, donors, strangers, rose in a standing ovation. The documentary was scheduled to roll out in schools across the continent free of charge. The goal wasn't fame, it was hope. It was proof that a child's future wasn't measured by wealth, but by how deeply someone believed in them. One evening, back at Duncan House, the three sat on the balcony. "Do you remember the biscuit tin?" Millie asked, smiling. "With the Sky Fund label?" Lillian chuckled. "I think it's still in Papa's wardrobe." "I kept it," Duncan said, sipping warm ginger tea. "Some things you never throw away." Millie leaned against his shoulder. "We're thinking of opening another school, one with robotics and aviation programs," Lillian added, "and a summer camp for girls with dreams too loud for their small villages." Duncan exhaled. The wind brushed through the mango leaves. The sky above held familiar blinking red lights, planes crossing silently like prayers in motion. "I'll draw the blueprints," he said. They all laughed, and far away on the other side of the world, a teacher showed Duncan's story to a new classroom. A child raised her hand and asked, "Sir, do all fathers love like this?" The teacher paused, then said, "Some do, and when they do, it changes everything." 25 years. That's how long it had been since Duncan had buried Christiana, made a vow with trembling lips, and stepped into fatherhood with empty arms and overflowing fear. And now, as he stood before a cheering crowd at the 20th anniversary of Christiana Memorial School and Health Center, he realized that his promise hadn't just survived time, it had grown roots and flown skyward. His steps were slower now, his back a little more curved, but his eyes held the same fire. His cane, hand-carved by Millie, tapped gently against the tiled platform as he approached the podium. Children in crisp uniforms waved small paper planes. Nurses in white coats held up placards. Educate a girl, heal a nation. The choir sang A Father's Promise, a song written by Lillian during a layover in Frankfurt, now sung by schoolchildren across the country. Duncan adjusted the microphone, voice steady as always. I once had nothing but a vow, he began, and 2 daughters with big eyes and bigger dreams. They were told girls weren't worth the risk. They proved the world wrong. Applause roared, but he lifted a hand for quiet. This isn't my story anymore, it's theirs and yours, because every time you choose hope over fear, love over pride, you are part of this legacy. After the ceremony, a young girl named Ramina, now 13, bold and bright-eyed, walked up to Duncan and tugged his sleeve. Sir, I want to be an aerospace engineer and help Captain Lillian fly spaceships one day. His throat caught. He bent down, knees creaking like old floorboards, and looked her dead in the eyes. Then you aim even higher than the clouds, my child. You aim so high, they have to build new skies for you. A photographer captured the moment. That image, an old man kneeling before a girl with big dreams, went viral again. The caption read, Faith in Flight, the vow that sparked a generation. Back home, the house was buzzing with celebration. Librarians, pilots, engineers, mothers from the donor milk program, former skeptics. Every room overflowed with laughter, music, and the smell of jollof rice and grilled chicken. Duncan stood on the balcony that night, sipping malt from a frosted glass, as conversations hummed behind him. Millie leaned against the rail beside him, her hair streaked with grey now, but her eyes still sparkled with invention. I've been thinking, she said, it's time we expand the engineering wing. Had drone development, maybe AI labs. Lillian joined them, arms crossed, calm and commanding in her Skyway Airlines captain's blazer. And more flight simulators, not second-hand, new, full-scale. Duncan smiled. Just don't forget to leave room for books. They all laughed. Later that night, the twins dimmed the lights and called everyone into the living room. A projector lit up the wall. A final gift, a full-length documentary titled Clear the Runway. It wasn't just about them. It was about all the children who came after. It followed a girl from a fishing village who now studied aerospace in Nairobi, a boy with asthma who learned to walk properly after treatment at the school's clinic and now dreamed of becoming a doctor. A widow who was hired as a school cook and now sends her daughter to university. As the credits rolled, the camera panned across the words carved into the school's front entrance. Let every child be a takeoff, not a statistic. Tears. Clapping. Silence. Then more clapping. Duncan didn't speak much that night. He didn't need to. Every face around him, every path carved from his struggle, every echo of his once small vow, was speaking louder than words ever could. A month later, Duncan was invited to speak at an international conference in Kigali on fathers in nation building. He almost said no. He didn't feel like a politician, but Lillian said, "You're not going as a speaker, you're going as evidence." He flew on his daughter's plane, sat in the cockpit during landing. Millie joined via livestream from her lab, where she was testing solar-powered aviation systems for humanitarian missions. On the last night of the conference, a boy from Sierra Leone approached Duncan backstage. "My father left," he said, "but after hearing your story, maybe I can be the one who starts the vow." Duncan held his hand. "You don't need to inherit love to give it. Build what you weren't given. That's how we fix the world." When he returned home, a new surprise awaited. A statue, life-sized, commissioned by former scholarship recipients. It stood in the courtyard of Christiana Memorial School. The sculpture showed Duncan holding hands with 2 little girls, one carrying books, the other holding a carved wooden plane. Beneath it, the inscription read, "To the man who swept floors and cleared runways for us all." Duncan stood before it for a long time, speechless. And that night, after the house had gone quiet, he sat alone in his study, opened his old leather journal, flipped to the very first page where a young man once scribbled, "I will take care of you girls myself." He added a new line beneath it, "They took care of the world." Then he leaned back, exhaled slow, and looked up. Outside, the sky was full of stars, and somewhere high above, a plane blinked red as it crossed into another time zone. Maybe it was Lillian, maybe not, but it didn't matter anymore. Because every time a girl dreams in math and wings, every time a father picks love over ego, every time someone chooses sacrifice over applause, the vow lives on, forever.